But we begin this afternoon with legal questions surrounding the Deportation Depot, the second immigration detention facility that state leaders here in Florida have just announced. They made that announcement yesterday. It's a new detention facility at the Baker Correctional Institution. Joining us now to talk about this and other immigration issues right now in the state of Florida is Elizabeth Ricci, an immigration attorney and an adjunct professor at the Florida State University. And Elizabeth, we appreciate you joining us again here on Florida Live.
Thank you for having me, Garrett.
So this second facility that was just announced yesterday comes now as legal questions still surround not just Alligator Alcatraz, but kind of broader, the state's authority to detain these federal immigration detainees.
Right. Florida is using the 287G agreements under the Immigration Nationality Act to really expand its involvement in immigration enforcement. It presents some due process questions. That remains to be seen how that will pan out, but there are some concerns, especially that there's not much oversight when it's a state-run facility over a federal issue. The example I keep bringing up is, let's take the emotion out of it. What if we asked your viewers if you think that Florida should be allowed to invalidate U.S. postage stamps or issue its own patents? That's essentially what Florida is doing with these detention facilities. Immigration is a federal matter that's regulated by the federal government. I'm not saying it's not a broken system, but I'm saying Florida doesn't have a place in this process, and it is for Congress to regulate.
There have been a lot of questions, and we even heard some of these arguments in the federal courtroom this past week when it came to Alligator Alcatraz, and that's over kind of the jurisdictional question of the state versus the federal government. And I'm curious what sort of precedent all of this sets when it comes to other states looking at this.
Well, it's a concern because Florida is using this 287G power exponentially more than other states. I believe Wyoming is the next state using it at only 11%. So Florida is becoming a leader on this issue, but whether they have the authority is really the question. And as states expand their powers to regulate federal matters, that will trickle into other areas of law and other parts of life, which is where it's going to get even more concerning and more serious. Right now, Florida Highway Patrol has the authority to interrogate any suspected alien and detain without federal oversight. So that creates some serious Fourth and Fifth Amendment concerns. And now with expedited removal being expanded, that compounds those issues by eliminating our traditional due process protections. So lots of concerns when states start getting involved in federal matters. And again, I use that example of regulating postage stamps or patents.
You mentioned the legal challenges, the ongoing lawsuits against Alligator Alcatraz. Governor DeSantis was asked about the potential for legal challenges when it comes to Deportation Depot. He said yesterday, essentially, bring it on, saying they welcome those legal challenges and believe that even if they kind of lose initial decisions on appeal, that they would have a leg to stand on. What do you see happening with some of these legal challenges and these ongoing lawsuits about this?
Well, it's a concern because we as Florida taxpayers are going to pay the brunt of those challenges. And I think ultimately we will see that states have limited authority to regulate federal matters. And this is going to have to be ultimately decided by Congress. In the meantime, we're seeing environmental challenges with what you're referring to as Alligator Alcatraz, an intentionally dehumanizing name. The correct name is Everglades Detention Center. And those environmental concerns are because in Florida, we have the precious Florida panther. There's less than 250 of them in the wild. It will affect water quality, and it maybe even violates federal laws that protect Native American Miccosukee members' religious freedom. So it is not allowed to circumvent environmental law to attempt to enforce immigration law. Federal law is federal law is federal law.
You talk about the names of these facilities, and I know you've expressed some concerns about these kind of branding tactics of them. Why is that?
Well, they're intentionally dehumanizing. Deportation Depot, Alligator Alcatraz. These are catchy alliterations that are not appropriate when we're talking about people's lives. The president has said time and time again that he is after the worst of the worst, which I totally understand and support, but the data does not bear that out. The worst of the worst is not who's being put into these facilities. Less than 7% of detainees have serious criminal histories. Less than 10% have any criminal history whatsoever. So when we start using local and state resources to enforce immigration law, something that the federal government should be doing, we are taking resources away from local matters, and that is causing a concern for people, whether they're immigrants or not, because they're going to be less inclined to report crime, less inclined to go to work, less inclined to send their kids to school if they have an immigrant loved one, and that does not do any Floridian any good.
Elizabeth, we've seen some heavy-handed tactics from state leaders, the governor, the attorney general, in essentially threatening leaders of some localities across the state who have pushed back against the 287G agreements or against the addendums to the 287G agreements. And I'm curious where you think the kind of legal battle there goes, and whether these localities and these local governments and officials have any chance of prevailing in this this pushback, or if state law really has them bound here.
Well, it's ironic because the governor and the president are all about local control and states' rights, except when it contradicts what their position is. Local leaders have been elected locally by their constituents to do what their constituents think is important and want to be done. And when that is in contradiction to what the governor or the president likes, then all of a sudden we want to remove those people from office. Constituents elect people for a reason, and those people should be able to carry out what their constituents want, whether it's pro-immigration, anti-immigration, whatever. That's what they were elected to do. And we can't pick and choose who gets to stay in office based on a governor or a president's particular position if they're not violating the law.
But do you think these cities and counties that are challenging this have a chance to win those challenges against this?
Sure, I think they have a chance, but at what expense? At what actual financial expense, and what career and other expense remains to be seen. People are going to be much less inclined, which is of course intentional. It's a chilling effect to challenge the government, the state or federal government, if they oppose their viewpoints. And we are a country that is based on a diversity of viewpoints. It is not healthy in a government to have only one viewpoint. And this is a very dangerous and slippery slope we're going down when we only want one side of an issue to be heard.
Elizabeth Ricci, immigration attorney and FSU adjunct professor. Always appreciate your perspective, and thanks for joining us this afternoon here on Florida Live.
Thanks for having me back, Garrett.